tell you a little bit more about, or let me tell you something about our guest speaker, and I'll get him up here. Dwight Nordstrom is really a pioneer in this area. He's worked for over 25 years in international business. And some of his background, he worked at GE, but that was like a long time ago, right? But now he's been continuing to work in the area of manufacturing consulting, helping startups, helping consult with organizations that are working overseas. And he's really been a pioneer in then coupling that manufacturing and business expertise with a heart for mission, and then promoting the well-being of those people that he works with, and those people who are making parts and employed by the manufacturing facilities in Central Asia, China, and other areas he's probably going to tell you about. So he has a wealth of experience to share with you. But one last thing, probably, you may have heard him before. He's been mentioned in previous seminars, actually, during the conference here. You may have read a book that he's a co-author on about transforming business. But around here, he's maybe more well-known for being an uncle of Diane here, who was a Baylor student, a junior. So we're glad to have you. Thanks for coming and sharing this afternoon with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And can we open with prayer? Oh. Hey, we give that praise to him. Hey, Father in heaven, we just ask that you would guide our minds and our hearts to be receptive to what you want to tell us. Lord, we are very cognizant that you have a special heart for the poor and for those poor spiritually who have really no reasonable chance to hear Jesus the Christ and the good news that you are. So, Lord, as we think about business and the relationship to that, open our minds. In Jesus' name, amen. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and it's great to be in Texas. I did my undergraduate degree and one of my graduate degrees here in Texas, one at TCU and another at UT Houston. And I lived full-time in China for most of the last 25 years, and I've enjoyed the Texas barbecue. It's been great. And I took my watch off because it reminded me. I grew up in a church that was Swedish-speaking until the early 50s. And I was taught not to bet. But there's one type of betting that I was allowed to do. And frankly, I've never lost in it. I used to play professional basketball. And what it was is growing up, as well as actually in the university days and beyond, I would either do a horse, pig, or one-on-one with guys. And if I lost, I would come with them to whatever they wanted me to come to, the bar or whatever. But if they lost, they would come to me to some spiritual event. And I got a lot of guys to the BSU and other places. But when I was 7 years old, I had a friend called Tim Mulry, who was 2 years older, and he was a Roman Catholic. And so he lost, but I said, Tim, listen, I'll go with you to your church. So I went to the Roman Catholic Church and asked all these questions about, what the priest was doing now, doing this for sacraments. And so then I brought him to our Baptist church, and similar to a lot of the Southern Baptist churches, preachers are known to talk overtime. And so when our preacher took his watch off, put it on basically the platform, Tim turned to me and he said, well, what does that mean? And I said, Tim, absolutely nothing. So that might, hopefully, what I would like is we've got an hour to go through a very influential topic. And I think rather than holding questions, I'm much more comfortable with high interaction. I am an operations person, though I've written about 17 articles or a book dealing with the subject or manufacturing excellence. I've been a general manager at 6 factories, have had 4,000 to 5,000 employees. I've fired over 1,000 in various places. I love operations, and really that means very immediate corrective action reports, immediate feedback. So please step up to the plate. The other that I wanted just to give 2 challenges. I've gone around Baylor, and I've asked some students, tell me your university mission statement. Now, we have over 470 qualified suppliers. Our total spend for a company with our partner companies is about $100 million a year. And we basically, a qualified supplier is a very diligent process. We have over 30 sourcing engineers that manage that outsourcing, that buy. And ISO, which is one of the standards, we actually have ISO 9000, ISO 14000 environmental, quite a bit. We do a lot of medical parts, so a lot of ISO 1345. But one of the things you have to do in ISO is talk to employees in the company and you say, what's your company's vision statement? Unfortunately, Baylor right now does not pass because the people that I talk to, students, most of them that I talked to, just a couple handful, but I picked them out randomly, they could not tell me what the vision statement is. And I want to tell you, I know as Baylor is wrestling positively with the issue of how to integrate world-class education with the Christian faith, I'm here to tell you from a business perspective, we have been, as a company, very successful, intimately integrating our business and our Christian faith. Granted, it's been in unreached parts of the world that don't have the same ethics, and so we think it gives us tremendous competitive advantages. But from my perspective, I come with, there's an absolute integration. It certainly involves challenges. I mean, you know, we do so many new designs every year. I mean, just in our antenna business, we do over 320 new individual designs every year. And so my comment is, it is a dialectic, but it's a positive dialectic that I think both can be accomplished. And I would encourage Baylor to continue in that thing. And I think this institution's got a wonderful future as you wrestle through with that. The second is we've had a lot of speakers. I've gone in this who come from a perspective that I personally don't currently share. When I finished one of my grad schools at the Harvard Fletcher School in 1982, we had a class just under 200 people. The class divided up into sort of a 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. About a fourth of my classmates went into international aid. All the people that I've kept touch with, and I've tried to look into things, none of those people are currently in international aid. And many of them went in with incredibly high ideals. We only had, by the way, 2 Christians out of 200 in the class. And I think that there may be some relationship to that. But my impression, and I've been to about 40 countries, so I've spent most of my time building businesses within China. I've done quite a bit, though, in Central Asia and some of the Islamic countries, is that businesses, particularly the small, medium enterprise businesses, employment of 50 to 500 with a technology bent, are wonderful ways to plant churches and bring all the other things that come with the kingdom of God. And at least from that statistical standpoint, I'm very, very bullish on the integration of world-class business going into unreached cities of the world, the urban areas. I think the rural has a whole different dynamic to it. That is not one that we have focused on or have been able to focus on. So I'm not talking a comprehensive perspective, but from our experiences, we've started over 25 operations. We've had some home runs, and both financially but also spiritually. And I just want to encourage you. For me, my call when I was 11 was to be a missionary. When I was 19, God turned that call on its side from being a missionary pilot or missionary doctor. He said, Dwight, I'm asking you to assist Chinese Christians in seeing churches started among the Chinese world, and particularly mainland China. And that was 1975, and those that you know, the Cultural Revolution was still in its very much high part. Mao Zedong was still living, and frankly, I remember going to the BSU and people sort of laughing at me. And I said, well, you know, so what do I do for those that are, you know, study the language and progress from there. So we're going to go fast through things. Please ask questions, and hopefully you'll leave with a couple things. One is an increase in knowledge, but I'm really hoping that there would be some application, be it in your business, in your scholastic approaches, that you can see that this is an important spoke. It's not a cure-all for all things, but if you're interested and passionate about God's interest and see that all people groups, all cities would have an incarnational presence of the gospel, medium-sized businesses are a wonderful tool to actually get there. Feel free to, you can contact me by email. I will probably refer you to other people in our group, but I'd be happy to answer things. I don't like doing commercials, so real quickly, to give you the variety of things that we do, we are a holding company, an investment holding company with operational excellence. We do have over 1,000 employees. About typically 1/4 to 1/3 of our employees are engineers across a wide gamut of material science, EE, mechanical engineering, et cetera. We have quite a few PhDs. And we work in the areas of specialty chemical, precision plating. We're the largest medical stent manufacturer in China. 9 or 11 operations are in what we call OEM value chain manufacturing. And we typically say, how can you know all this stuff? Well, we basically partner typically at a 40 to 45, 49% ownership, with the majority owner of the company being a world-class company in their particular niche, coming either from the US, Israel, or Western Europe. In all those cases, those companies have recognized our skill sets, so that, just to give you an idea of the typical deal, even though these companies may be $200 million, they got 100 plus patents, they would recognize that we're going to come in, both of us, in a royalty-free relationship to this new startup, or to if we do an acquisition, because we really come with a strong operational excellence. And the way that both of us make money is by dividends, so we don't have a typical management fee structure. For those of you that know, most holding companies make money regardless of if their businesses make money. That's not us. Our two non-manufacturing operations and engineering centers would be our consulting division. It's a small group, about 25 people, small 7 figures per year, quite profitable. And then secondly, we'll talk about one illustration. We set up a publishing operation that's made some inroads in China. Okay, this is a brief map. Our focus, you'll see we're not in South China. We do obviously a lot of sourcing in South China, but our interest is only in going in significant size unreached cities. So that means over 1 million population, typically only 1, 2, or 3 open churches. As a quick sort of benchmark, we set goals that typically we'll see out of the factories, which are profitable. We'll see 1 to 4 Bible studies, which turn into churches, hopefully, God willing, every year for locations. So those are some of the goals. Again, each location is different. To generalize across all would not give you a precise answer, but to give you a good indication of some of our goals. So that gives you an idea of our footprint. What we're about, sort of the old Collins, and we're passionate about starting and growing, synergistic, so we got to see some synergy. You just don't do anything in the world, you focus. Businesses, we think we're best in the world in terms of startup manufacturing consulting. We have very demanding customers that come to us and say, help us start up. We are a recognized player with that within China. We've actually helped start close to 50 plus operations in China. And we're also world-class in being a minority partner. Part of being a minority partner is basically learning how to bend over when you need to, but in all cases, we get to appoint the general manager, and so far, we've been pretty successful at keeping the ability to maintain it mutually as a great commission company, both financially very profitable, but also as from a kingdom producing results. And our engine, basically dividends, is number 1 by far, asset valuation, and then also some consulting revenue. We do own the consulting company 100%. You always want to, get, and this is my wife. I met Jewel in China. She's a wonderful girl from Minnesota. She was teaching PhDs. To give you an example, if anybody knows about the concept of guanxi in China, this is not why I married her, but 2 of the 9 Politburo members were her PhD students. Vice Premier, who's going to be the Premier after the next 4 years is done, was her student for over a year, and very familiar with them. Our 2 girls, the one girl was both adopted. It's great to be a dad. I became a dad later in life. And the second girl, Jasmine, this girl, we just were blessed with receiving this May. And she's from the earthquake region of China. We were down there within a week of the earthquake. She was orphaned from day 1, but with the amount of orphans coming in, they were happy to have it. And so it's just been a great blessing. To give you an example, the countries that are, if you look at population, clearly China and India are 2 countries that have decided, in general, on very much a capitalistic model, which is bringing in international technology, bringing in outside capital, looking at export markets, building upon intellectual resources. And so the model I'm talking about, which is setting up medium-sized companies, and we'll give some more definition of that, in major unreached cities, certainly for those 2 countries is eminently doable. We're very cognizant, too, of the fact as a company that when I started right about here in university, under 40% of the world's Christians were in the West. Were in the non-West. Christianity was primarily a Western religion. We know now through excellent research, that simply is not the case. And our company, we have over 10 countries in addition to bringing people from multiple parts of China. We very much seek to have a multicultural society. In fact, one of our 9 best practices that we intentionalize at our startups that would be different from just the best practice we take, like, let's say, from a industry standpoint, we get from Deloitte, what are the best practices for our specialty chemical industry. We metric that. And also just from a mission standpoint, we take best practices. But sort of that hybrid, we have found it to be extremely useful for all of our operations to have Christians from 3 different cultures that participate. And so we think we're trying to acknowledge that. Okay, there are several, as you look at what are some variables to ask regarding, if you're interested. So let's assume we want to have a kingdom impact in an unreached city in the world of 1 million more people. That's in the 1040 window. So the worlds of Islam, ethno-people groups of India, or the cities of China. And so these are just some questions that you want to do. The first is, among several, these are not in priority. We believe we have seen, there's now over 1,000 BAM companies. And there's a huge differential and a very high predictive force of what business you do and its kingdom impact. So as an example, a bad example is we've had people that I know of that have gone to Malaysia. They set up a conversion of OS system using Fortran and C++. They brought a bunch of Westerners into a location. Their customers were Westerners. And they simply were not that effective in getting to the people. They were doing all the work themselves. And we think that, that the type of business is a highly predictive indicator of how pregnant. In manufacturing, we feel manufacturing gives us enormous opportunity to relate to our primary constituency, our fellow employees. We typically have 50 to 500 at each of their locations. Our customers, and our suppliers. And that's where our primary initial outreach is. Now, once the Bible study is started or what else, we see growth from that. By the way, we do not take any nonprofit financing, so we can talk about some of the best practices we have, but this is very much a commercially led event. Additional things you want to look at, we encourage cross-cultural versus near. We do think that a focus, skipping down a little bit, the focus on a city people group gets much more mileage than just sort of a generic, I'm going to set up a distribution company and I really don't care where it is. We've not seen a lot of people who've accomplished both a bottom line of spiritual and financial results who had sort of a pre-understanding of what business they were going to do. We really think it's better to partner with somebody who's a technology-rich company, find a team that's committed to that city, and just get after it. And there's ways that you can train people. So I want to manage time here, so let's keep going. One of the things of a medium-sized company is we think that by necessity requires overseas private equity. Ken Eldred has written about this. So our classical investment is typically, our average investment has been $3 million per operation. And again, we've had some a little bit below that. We've had some that go a fair amount above that. But $3 million is a good spot. For us, we think, if you're going to do something and spend the time, plan it a little bit bigger. Don't aim too small. If you aim small, we talk about it, and there are successful examples. But in general, if you have a good coffee shop in some street of Cairo, and you're successful within a couple months, you're going to have multiple competitors, with very low cost margins, low cost of goods, very close to you. You want to set something up with a barrier to entry. And that's where I think the technology relationships and frankly, the cash helps a lot. Steve Rundle, Dr. Rundle's done a great job in doing some writing regarding Great Commission companies, and there's a definition, so we don't want you to read that. You guys are all fully literate. I wanted to sort of data dump here, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm hoping that you leave, and if you have a passion for unreached parts of the world, I'm hoping that one of the things you're going to go with is going to say, we just aim too low. we aim too low. And basically, the win percentage, we have invested right now in over 18 years, like 21, 22 operations within China. We've sold off 6, and that was as a group. The product we were doing had become relatively commoditized. It was a variety of lighting accessories, made money on them. We've only had to shut down to date 2 operations. That's frankly really good. Typically 5 years, 80% of businesses shut down. So we think that that's a very good track record, and compared to a lot of other businesses' mission efforts, which are small, if you want to increase your win percentage, we think go for a larger size, but that requires better planning. Additional thing is these are additional benefits that larger companies have. There are ways that you can relate to if you're trying to be an advocate. Today we've heard at the 10:30 meeting advocacy. Well, advocacy is going to the mayor and saying, look why aren't you allowing this local Christian church to meet, or this guy's in prison, or we want these. Why are you doing this? Why and I could tell you lots of stories about having local changes done because we simply went and talked to local government. You can't get that visibility with them if you're a small player. This is not to in any way boast, but it just as an example. Beijing has 12 districts, and the largest tax revenue in China today is a value-added tax, the VAT tax. Historically, actually, it was a cigarette tax, and it dwarfs income tax at this point. And one of the districts of Beijing is in northwest Beijing, Chongqing, and one of the factories that we had just started in '98 really did very, very well, and it was a startup. I was a GM. In '99, I got an award from the mayor. And he said that 26% of his VAT receipts for the entire 1.3 million population came from my one factory. Now, we'd have dinner once a month together, or a lunch. That mayor, I just heard on this trip, one of the guys was explaining that one of the churches, actually an international church, and I'd heard about it, but in another district of Beijing, which was Shunyi, was shut down, and then they went to, Chaoyang, which is another district, which hasn't had that problem. Guess where the mayor from Chongqing is right now? In Chongqing. And we relate together and he remembers those good days of giving a lot of tax receipts. There's nothing like paying taxes in terms of building government relations in a positive way, non-under-the-table way. So there are some unique ways that larger-sized businesses, it also, frankly, it's very, when you have larger operations, you can differentiate skill sets. Typically, an entrepreneurial group of 1 to 5 people, everybody's almost doing everything. But as you gain mass and size, your finance person really can become not just an accountant and a taxpayer, but can become a CFO, can give valuable advice regarding purchase decisions of equipment, regarding outsource versus really helping you come up with what-if models. And on and on and on to customs. Customs is a hassle any place, but particularly in these worlds. And you want somebody that does customs day in and day out and not on an ad hoc basis. So size allows you to really focus on different skill sets and I think broaden, again, the kingdom of God. We can go through this, but suffice it to say there's a multitude of reasons why a larger size OPE in these cities really is not the, but is a good response to the opportunity to gain incarnational witness in those locations. We have, again, 9 best practices. I just pulled out a couple, but some of the things that maybe differentiate us, we would always seek to have someone called a strategy coordinator who's either on our board of directors or on our board of advisors, and that person typically will be at the operation 5 hours a week. Again, that's very highly variable. But I know when I work 55 to 60-hour work weeks, it's really tough for me to get bandwidth on strategic Great Commission issues. I can do the witnessing, but on strategic issues, I need help. And these strategy coordinators, where we have them, they've been invaluable, and where they've been good. And we've had mix. Have been invaluable in really catalyzing efforts. It's a wonderful example of partnership. between business and missions. And so I encourage you to, and these are people that we would at minimum provide visas for. If they're only working a couple hours a week, we may provide a small stipend, but they're not really contributing to the direct profitability of the company, so we don't pay them like that.
Do you get those guys from the agencies directly?
The three sources of SCs right now have been historically International Mission Board, Assemblies of God, and YWAM. The last group of which you're quite familiar with, actually the last couple of years, hasn't really been training those people that well. And there is a special training that goes on with strategy coordinators that puts them thinking about asking these networking questions, how do I use this business to really change the city? And it's networking all sorts of great commission resources. And as business people, engineers, et cetera, it's tough. We don't have those skill sets nor the ability to time. So the nice thing about going to the 1040 window, that's actually a model of what I think the church and business should be in North America today. But the issue is the church feels it doesn't need the business, and a lot of times the business people don't really know they need the church. I know for me, we could not operate at an efficient level from a Great Commission perspective in planning of churches or discipleship without those type of people involved. Another example is that we have just under 100 non-nationals from 10 countries, and even though those of us in the business are not paid by any sort of mission agency, we have made it a standard practice, actually a requirement, that we're spiritually accountable to a group. And that group, we typically go to a conference once a year. They come visit us in our homes. We have had people that have moral failures. We've had business successes where the GM went off and found another wife. We've had people that, frankly, lost their vision for seeing God's results. And we need check valves on that. And so we give them actually unilateral veto power in regards to whether or not we can keep a person. That's a corporate commitment. And that's tough. I mean, we've had a situation, super financial company, one of our key people had a moral failure, and that person's spiritual accountability group said, and this was the HR director, and they said he's got to go back, he and his wife have to go back to the U.S. for a minimum of 2 months. I held the position for 2 months. By the way, I was hiring 25 new people a week, of which five were technical people. And we did that for 4 straight months. And by month 3, and this group said, I said, well, isn't he coming back? And they said he's not ready. And my response was, okay, don't end run them, but it was like, okay, even though his compensation was totally from the business. So that's been a really positive thing for us, though at times a limiting thing. I'm sure there'll be other models and ways. For us, that has worked very, very well. Okay. Now just to give you the one non-manufacturing example. We do know OEM manufacturing, and we've demonstrated that. But I was really upset in 2002 because one of the top 5 bestsellers in China was this book called Black is Beautiful. And the book's thesis was, and my workers showed it to me, and they were frankly pretty hyped on it, and they were going like, see, the way you do stuff isn't right, And the book's thesis was to be a business person. It's sort of a neo-Confucianism perspective. To be a good business person, you have to bribe people, you have to lie to people, you have to cheat people, you have to intentionally seek to deceive people. And it was a bestseller, and for quite a while. And so then somebody got the bright idea of, okay, how many Christian-like books are in China that have really been, are sellable? We came up with a number just a little over 200 in 2002. And most of those were not in stock in stores. And then, yes?
I just want to ask you about that.
Please do.
Confucianism thing, and I'm not asking it because I really know a whole lot about it, but I'm just thinking about Lawrence Harrison. What I don't want to leave just sitting out there is this idea that Confucianism tells you to lie and to cheat and so on. And I remember Lawrence Harrison writing a book and said that, that Confucianism can be a real source of great values that lead to lots of good.
Yeah, and let me say why I said, no, thank you. Let me say why, and I accept that, and thank you very much. The reason why I suggested that was, actually the book suggested that.
Right.
And the book's suggestion was, in Confucius' hierarchy of order, it was loyalty to government, number one, loyalty to your father, number two, to your brother, number three, and business basically was actually down at the farmer level in terms of importance to society, et cetera. And so what you had is virtue. If you go look at virtue, the thesis was, among several, and again, summary leads to inaccuracies at various points, but virtue actually is high up here, supposedly, and society works well peacefully and harmoniously. But as you go down, virtue can be, it's not as important, as long as there's respect in those regards. So it was really the placement of business people. I think it's a relatively true statement in practice historically that business and Christianity, pre-Protestant Reformation, had a fairly low standard. Within the Confucian world, it actually was at least as low, if not lower. Certainly, as it, I think, developed within the Protestant Reformation and subsequent, it's gotten a little higher standard, but we still have our dialectic of sacred and secular, which I would say is normally a false dialectic from God's perspective. We then looked at, well, who was the best publisher that was doing these books, and they had done 17 books in 34 years. And so it was clear, we did some back of the envelope, it's like, there's no way you can be profitable. How can you, because the average sales price of a book is $2.50. You're selling at a 40% discount. I mean, it was so we just said, hey, to do this right, we need to put in $1.5 million. We got to get to 40 books a year, and we got to have some associated business. And we've been able to do that. So if you hear of ZDL, I mean, we're frankly about the most known Christian publisher in China. I don't know a lot about publishing, but we're profitable and sustainable at this point. So, and what we did, and this chart shows you, the other thing that sort of hit us afterwards, but very close to that, was somebody showed us this and said, hey, the young people, and it's officially under implementing regulations of certain Chinese laws, it's illegal under the implementing regulations to actually proselytize people under 18. And we then looked, and there was no contextualized Sunday school literature that was grade specific. So we began a program in 2004. We don't put this on our website, but we've now done 3 ages, and this year, I mean, it's going to close quickly. We're pretty 600,000 kids in China will use our Sunday school literature, and that's pretty neat. And we're also making some money off of it, And our marketing for those particular books, we've got 6 to 8, 8 to 10, and 10 to 12. Has to be a little bit creative at times, because not all are officially approved. But we've been doing it, and God's been honoring that. And that's from somebody that doesn't know media. So my comment is, if you get, and we found a tech partner that knew nothing about China, but that had had a lot of IPR in this area. So you can do things. And so I want to sort of close with, this was actually in a city that hadn't had snow for 20 years. That factory is approaching 40 million in sales. Nice, let's say 10% after profit taxes on revenue per year. Mid 7-figure initial investment. Valuations doing very well. And all but 2 of those people, that's just the professional staff at the factory, are now believers. And that's from 0 starting off. People wanted me to give an illustration. You may know a company called Flextronics. And we acquired one of their operations in China. We did a 100% buyout. And when we did it, they had 139 workers. Normally, most of our things have been startups, so now we're doing a lot more M&A, which is one of the big changes in China. And there's several reasons for that. There's actually more logical candidates. But when we did this acquisition, Flex had been doing it for 8 years. So a Western company, 139 workers, about 50 plus professionals, so engineers, et cetera. No one in the factory had ever seen a Bible. Very standard for how we start off with stuff. 50% were Communist Party members. 48% were Communist Party members. which means they're technically non-theist or atheist. Only 1 out of 139, of course there was no Christians, 1 out of 139 had connected Jesus because of the character with Christmas. We've on average seen 2 or more Bible studies a year spin off of that factory in the last 3 years since we acquired it. Now we're still struggling financially with that factory. Actually, that is financially my biggest challenge right now of an existing operation. But that's a classic model. As we start off with, none of our nationals are believers, and we see things take off, and hopefully then affect the society around it. I mean, our whole interest is not just the workers, but gaining presence and an opportunity outside of that operation. So I really hope sometimes when I talk, people get the impression that I'm thinking like this is me or it's my team. But I really want to let you know, for one, China's been growing, and you can probably be pretty average and still done okay in China. So maybe but I really want to emphasize that I don't think any of this is because of our skill sets primarily. It really is results coming from God. And I would really encourage models that focus on larger size models, building teams, so you're not relying upon individual, building partnerships across a broad spectrum of business partnerships, as well as nonprofits or missiological agencies. And it is an emerging model. It's been documented. There's case studies. I'm not talking about things that are just, one-off examples. This is something that we didn't have 15 years ago, and I thank God for that.
Can you give us a couple examples about how you do things operationally different? I guess what I'm wondering about is it seems like just part of the picture is that you guys work hard, you provide good jobs for people, just oversimplified, you're nice to them, and then they're open to the gospel. Is there something actually business-wise, operationally, that you do different? Do you pay them more, or
no.
I don't know what it is.
We don't. We have, in terms of compensation, we pay for 3 reports every year: Watson, Wyatt, Hewitt, and Mercer. And I crunch them every year. That's one of my major tasks that I haven't given up yet as chairman, is I'll actually individually review well over 1,200 workers. Now, I'm not going to personally meet with all 1,200 workers, but I'm going to see every single compensation review. Our typical salary philosophy, and one of our factories is different. It depends what your mix is of PhDs and others, but we'll pay 50% of the norm of foreign invested enterprises in that area. We then want to make sure that we balance. Anytime you do a startup or acquisition, you're going to get imbalances. People, and so we very much seek that there's a perceived fairness within the company. Where it would be different on a compensation level is we budget, and my GMs are measured against this, 6% of HR costs should be done for continuing education. In the U.S., it's closer to 1%, depending upon industry. So we think, our would be, okay, we're going to pay you a market competitive wage. But really why you want to work with us is because we're going to really help build you an educational opportunity. So we think, the bang for the buck is high there. And secondly, we have a lot of lateral transfers. So as a holding company, we've had many people that have worked through 4 organizations. So there's sort of a ability to grow. You're not just stuck in a 5-person operation that's not going to change a lot. Operationally, there may be a couple things we have as policies that would be different. I think in terms of lean manufacturing, that's just putting your brain power to it and watching, observing, measuring. We would have a policy, anti-corruption policy that would be much more strict than most companies. We have training for that. It's our 4-step practice. We do not publicly in our factories, we certainly put up signs for Bible studies. I think all of our workers would be aware of our Judeo-Christian ownership. We don't in our vision statements that we have at each of the factories, we don't include the word Christian. But within the management team, they would be aware of that. We have a lot of managers that are non-believers, but they are people of peace and are supportive of what we do. By the way, most of our tech partners are not people of faith, but they let us run the operation. And to date, at least, you know, our first was 92, 93. So in 15 years, we've never had a tech partner ask us to leave them. If you look at the history of joint ventures and partnerships, that's pretty remarkable. Most break apart in a couple years. And I think a lot of that has to do with bending over backwards when they want something you don't think it's best, but it's, you know, keeping the right culture. Yeah.
Like your ethics training? Or what you do there?
We have, well, both the anti-corruption practice. If you were an indirect, you would get that once every 6 months. If you were a direct worker, you'd get it really once every 2 years or when you start in the operation. Beyond that, outside of what our handbooks would be and would have certain values, we don't do particular ethics training. We do have groups that come in and teach, like, some of our factories would be 65% female. And so they come in and teach good homemaking skills, relational skills. Others, we would have, some of our engineering operations would be probably 75, 80% male. So we don't have, I would say, a lot of ethics training beyond what you say. But clearly, the corruption issue and related quality issues would be key. We do a lot of quality training, so I guess that would almost necessarily imply ethics. Yes, sir?
Your four-step anti-corruption practice, do you have that in English? Would that be available?
Sure. Why don't you come up afterwards, give me your card, I'll be happy to do it. A real quick rundown of it. We, at a minimum, and it's frankly, this is a really weak standard, would be the FCPA, that's 1976, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. But more importantly, our next 3 steps would be the ones that we think really is where stuff gets, that the first one only tells you don't do government officials, to influence them for a specific decision within a certain time period. But we have a transparency test, which is everybody's got to know what's going on. And that one, frankly, shuts down most things. The next one would be the golden rule test, which is you have to role play, and you change positions. And it's amazing, you know, let's say I'm the seller now. Now if I'm the buyer and my buying agent is getting a free trip to this city for 4 days from this seller, would I want that? And the response would be probably not. You know, so you role play and you switch positions. So do unto others as you do it in you. And the last one would be actually what we call the gut check. You've got to have another line manager at your level or above. You don't shop for this. You got to go to one person. And if that person says, my gut says, I don't like it, no recourse, you don't do it. That is a weekly event just in my position. And that has not lessened. I wish it was, but it's still a weekly event that something comes up like that. Yes, sir.
Do you bring in specific people for believers and stick them in strategic positions as far as to create a spiritual atmosphere, or are you primarily relying on this key strategist?
Definitely the latter in regards to, I don't want to make a spiritual move without the strategist telling me that's stupid. Okay. But now he's got to convince us, he or she have to convince us that what he or she thinks is a good idea. So normally we're going to cities where there's no open church. Or if there is, it's like, 2 million people, one open church. Well, you're just not going to, are you going to get believers there? You hire 100 people. If you find one in these cities, that's probably fortunate. We have occasionally, we had a focus on a Islamic people group, and we knew we were not facing a 1 in 100 possibility, but like a 1 in 100,000 possibility. So we actually, in that case, we did intentionally hire 2 believers from that people group. We moved them to that city and put them on the production line. We had mixed results with that. So I can't tell you that's an overwhelming. It sounds good. We've only done it once. Probably we've done other places. I'm just not aware of it. Yeah.
Talks like this, I'm an academic.
Let me talk about business practices for a second. And could I go to your first comment? Not everybody has, I've experienced a family tragedy and seen that God can take a broken vessel and keep using it. And I'm incredibly grateful for God for that. Yet I can tell you, for now, so basically 31 years, I've not woken up. I can't remember a morning I've woken up and said, what am I doing? Now, I've kicked myself for doing investments that didn't reach all my minimum standards. Outside of being heartbroken by a couple of guys that, left God in successful businesses and having, I don't have a lot of heart. In terms of seeing this thing is working, it's working, full stop. Okay, so I do feel particularly blessed that through some brokenness, God's never taken away the vision that larger size businesses' mission in unreached cities is part of what he wants to see happen in the world today. I would hope that as you look, to me, today's today. And you make your decisions, and past investment is worth zero from an investor. So, do what you got to do, and that's what God leads you. Now, to your question, we've had a couple interesting things happen. Without an exception, all 11 operations have a higher educational, we're younger than all of our technology partners, and we also have a higher educational level. So one of the things that I tell my tech partners is, you guys aren't hiring high enough. Or you're getting people stuck in positions that are not continuous learning positions. Secondly, we've actually helped them with some of their intellectual property rights development. So I can predict for you within 4 years of a startup for us, we will give either a patent or a significant intellectual property right development back to our technology partner who's been doing it for decades. So maybe those are two practices, is that you aim high, aim for application engineering that modifies. We're not doing bleeding edge technology stuff, but we're doing pretty good new technology developments, and that's helpful. And have I done?
No, we're still on.
Okay.
I just realized that we're probably not capturing the questions for the video, so
okay.
If you have some more questions, I'd like to get the microphone, so it's
sure.
please on the record.
I just wondered if you could comment on whether your view of large-scale business mission changes in less developed parts of the world, and if so, how?
You go from the practical. We've started the 25 to now a very direct question. In the early 90s, we did not have the capital. Chris will remember. We bootstrapped everything. Okay, so we did, I'm thinking in Bishkek with the factory, we probably did like an $80,000, $100,000 investment. And I look back at the time and go, and what was I thinking? That was with Akmaral and stuff. So I actually think the globalization of the world, if you want to, most of our industries, we have to be number one or number two or we can't compete. So where you're number one or number two is somewhat irrelevant. I would say it's doable. It may be a little bit more difficult, but I think it's very doable. I think most of the people in those countries have just not, and to say that is a fault. I think to date, very few people have said, let me look, our stent factory, before we put it in, the only Chamber of Commerce for North Korea, the DPRK, is in Beijing. We've been members of that Department of Commerce for years. Okay. We did a bench. We decided finally not to put the stent factory in, and there was a reason for that. That eventually logistics just would not work because they had the one flight a week. But you can ship $20,000 of stents in this amount of packaging. They allowed us to, we have still thinking. In 2003, if we wanted to, we ended up investing, because of a couple $1 million investment in China. They allowed us to have a wholly foreign owned, our own facility, our own direct employees. We were not going to be stuck in the Russian economic zone way in the corner there. We were putting on, and we actually had a location that we could have done. Now, ultimately, the reason we didn't do it was for a business reason that dealt with logistics. Today, maybe if we did it again, that may have been solved. So I would tell you that with the right type of focus, it can be done, and then you outsource. And if the outsourcing is not there, you draw the outsourcing people to you. So I understand it's going to be more difficult, but I think it's been so the title is what? It's an underutilized model. And absolutely, in the 1040 window, these larger sized businesses that are technology driven and skill set driven are an underutilized model.
Any questions here?
Depending on the region that you're in, whether it's China or Central Asia or the Middle East, is there a particular way that you guys have identified that skill set that can be then incorporated into manufacturing?
You mean for individuals?
Yeah, individuals, in different
Okay.
countries, you may see, Southeast Asia is very good at technology. Some places in West Africa are very good at certain textiles. Is there a way that you guys have gone about?
So we're saying like a pre-existing labor force.
Yeah.
We do we do site feasibility studies. They typically have anywhere from 14 to 20 independent variables that we metric. So clearly universities in the area would be a key factor. It depends on what we're looking for. In some of our businesses, we need to hire 3 pretty competent material scientists. And those programs, master's programs, are not prevalent. So we either know we're going to have to move people in. And in most of these places, it's tougher to move people because their kids are in a school they don't want to leave. Maybe their spouse is working or for whatever reason. So that would then just lower that variable score and it doesn't come up. Again, I want to, our metric is it's got to make business sense first, full stop. At that point, then it's got to make great commission sense in being strategic. If it doesn't reach both, we don't do it.
So you do a feasibility study?
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually our feasibility studies, we think we do it so good. My GMs, when they start, if you talk like to GE or other people, a lot of times they'll do feasibility studies. Those things are buried in a computer or file drawer and never looked at. Our requirement is a feasibility study. It's a first-year operating plan for the GM. So,
time for a couple more questions. We're going to take you right up to the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Just quick, do you live year-round in China?
Oh, yeah. This is just, I'm back for just a short, that's why Texas barbecue was so good.
Do you just live in one city?
I live in Beijing, and then with the operations, becoming a dad, my commitment that I would say was not a self-initiated commitment, but I bought into it. My wife was very good at saying I could not travel more than 1 week a month. And so right now I'll, on average, spend 3 nights a month in some of the other operations. My primary role right now has been to coach the GMs, but really I've been a varied role. You step in, so I hope that answered your question.
Okay. Other than paying taxes, are there things you do to try to be a good corporate citizen in the cities where you are? And secondly, have you had any particular difficulties relating to the government in China?
The latter one I'll answer first. Not really. We're given tremendous favor with local governments. We've never had an employee kicked out of China. We did have an experience with our Christian publishing that was really countrywide, where for a while our pipeline, we had at one point 17 books in our pipeline that couldn't get past censorship, but everybody else was experiencing that, so it wasn't really a specific to us experience. We certainly well utilize our 3 people that do government relations at a national level, and then each operation has their local level. As a general operating principle for companies doing revenue of like 1 to 20 million, 1 to 2% of our gross revenue would be spent under expenses as government relations. We don't believe that involves corruption, but they're very active, what I would call political relationship maintenance and building. It's a cost you don't have here.
Do you hire exclusively Chinese nationals, or do you hire American citizens?
No, we have people from 10 countries. The long-term people, the only place that we would discriminate in hiring of Christians positively would be the non-nationals. And that's just what we've done. In the back there, at about 2 o'clock.
Do you foresee the opportunity for some of the nationals who are part of the operation that you have now, taking the model to other countries in Asia, nearby countries, and even underdeveloped nations?
We've had several, some of my best Chinese leaders, I mean, I had one guy that was with us for 10 years, 3 of our operations. And he was asked to be the CEO of a public traded company in Shanghai. Non-Christian company, and Jack, he came to me and said, Dwight, look it's time. I'd really like this opportunity. I mean, this is a nice $200 million operation. And I blessed him. He's became a Christian while with us. I don't think he does everything that I would do, but that's okay, and he's sharing his faith in that company. I would say there's a lot of outflow that way, though we clearly like to keep the good ones to ourselves. We think that there's opportunity for like this Back to Jerusalem movement. We are getting asked. Frankly, we've had a disconnect between the people that have expressed an interest and how we would rate them as business leaders. So I would say there's good, like maybe number 2s or number 3s available, but as a number 1, the business product champion that gets it done regardless, I have not had that.
So, quick follow-up to some of these comments. So, in an earlier session, I heard somebody say, well, it's kind of difficult to turn like a missionary into a business person. I feel like your message is more like speaking to business people who are excellent in a certain area. You already have the technical skills. You already have something you can offer into these countries. Is your message to those folks to say, hey, take advantage of your business credibility and your expertise and expand your business to think mission-minded more than it is to try and recruit other people to become business people? Am I hearing your message kind of that way?
Slightly, but not. Let me word it a little differently.
Sure.
The 1040 window, from my experience, requires absolute focus and commitment. And so this is not, what I would tell that engineering student is, if you're an electronic engineer, if you're a good accountant and you want to work in an unreached city or people group in the 1040, could you do it over the next 30 years? My response is absolutely. Okay, now from there, most are going, well, I have a 1 or 2 year interest, let me try it. I mean, that's a classic. And my response is, where we have seen really good church planting movements happening is with longer term presence. And so I would encourage them to get additional skill sets to be able to be effective over there. So such as language. If you learn Mandarin Chinese, Hindi, Arabic, Farsi, you're going to cover a lot of the unreached, so learn the language and get to working proficiency. Now at that point, you're eminently either hireable, or if you have get with a team. So there's sort of a couple other strands I would encourage. Find teams, ask God to just lay upon your heart a city or a people group or a type of business in general. If you get too specific, normally it's tough to do the straight transplant. The other, you talk about, I think that we've also found some people that were quote unquote professional missionaries, and we love them if we can enable them to do their stuff better, but they're ancillary to the business. Doesn't mean they're not important to the business and our total goals, but to the profit-making side, they're really ancillary. But there's some of them that frankly were miscast, and they went as non-business people or engineers because they didn't know any other way. And so there are people that I think that actually have those skill sets, but they felt they had to lay those aside because, they didn't see that both could be combined.
Okay. So I think we're one more up there, and then we're this up.
I just want to make a quick comment. I've known Dwight since '89, and I think that he has understated some important things. And maybe just a comment to finish up on. He's understated several important things. One of them is, he's pointed it out, he's been there long before most, and the locals know that. And the other thing is his integrity and the life that he has lived has been an example. He knows the language fluently. Very few expatriate business people do. His house is always open to expatriate or national business associates. He'll even tell you where the key is. And I think in one year they had over, I can't remember, they used to count, how many visitors they would have. So for those of you who are involved in business ethics work and so forth, it really does work to live a life that shines the light of Christ. It really pays off in the long run. So.
Thanks, Mike. Great. Coming from someone that lived in the UK, if I understated something, then I really must have understated something. So.
Dwight, thank you. We have to close up. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Thank you very much for coming to Baylor.